This is Green Lanterns 95 from 1998, and I feel sorry for this issue. This is a one-off by Jim Starman, and it is worth talking about. It is a standalone story, and there's definitely something to respect in there. But when I was thinking about this issue, I got distracted and went down a rabbit hole. And now this video is going to prematurely end about 8 pages in, because I cannot review the rest of the issue after the fucking... Before I even get to it, the thing that will hijack this video is all that is on my mind right now. My anger and my offence at it is entirely what is driving me. And it is very unfair to this comic because it has nothing to do with it or any other people involved. I will try to do right by this issue when I can. And when I do get to the thing that basically is killing this video, you will understand how I am not quite able to even think of anything else. Right, this is Green Lanterns, the Kyle Reese version. I think we are 3 or 4 years into his tenure as the main Green Lanterns. Interesting to see Jim Starman come along and do something with the new guy. And it is odd that Jim Starman, despite being seen as the Cosmic Man, hasn't done stuff with the Green Lanterns as much. With that said, what he does with Alvin Stewart in Cosmic Oddity is about the only character arc people call back to with Alvin Stewart. The other thing about Jim Starman is that his art isn't great. He is very good at storytelling. He is very creative visually. But when it comes to the actual art, it is imperfect. Like Kyle Reese on this page, his body is a mess. But then on the very next pages, we see what Jim Starman does really well with his art. He will give it his all. It is one of the things I find most endearing about him as a creator. Jim Starman, still to this day, doesn't half-arse. He goes all in. I tried to make a point in a video a few weeks ago about how Junior went from being a great artist to what he is now. And I really did not succeed at explaining what I meant. But Jim Starman is another good contrast. Jim Starman has never gotten worse. He has just gotten older. Jim Starman had been developing his artistic skills and identity almost from his first issue of Captain Marbles, the real one, Marvel. And like all those Goldie Age artists, those are things that he will not lose. This is instinct to him. Junior's instincts were muddied up by his decision to become stylized 10 years into his career, and now he has likely forgotten those instincts, and the blocky style he developed never became his instinct. Anyway, all of that is a tangent, and I am glad I went on it, because otherwise this video was going to be incredibly short. Green Lanterns has been called to this robot city in space. And I thought to myself, this is an incredibly Jim Starman story. Why does it feel like such an incredibly Jim Starman story? And the answer is because he did almost the same thing in Silver Surfman. Green Lanterns is here to solve a murder mystery that has occurred on this city. This robot city is ruled by humanoid overlords, and 3 of them have been found dead. This is a nice little compact story. It feels very retro, but in a good way. It's not deliberately trying to be retro. It simply feels like a story from 20 years ago. It is a tight, dense mystery in one issue, and it wastes very little time. One thing I did think with the first few pages was that maybe this was set up on the final pages of the previous issue, but it wasn't. We get a flashback here covering the rather pointless bit of story where Kyle Reese was contacted by these robots. In conclusion, because the review and recap have unfortunately come to its close here, I do recommend this issue to all those people who haven't touched a comic in a while. This is perfect for you. You won't know or won't care about the new Green Lanterns we got in the 90s. Kyle Reese. He'll be as alien to you as these servant robots. But all you need to know is that he was introduced to bring the Green Lanterns' books back to basics and give them a more relatable protagonist. He is very much your Peter Parker or your Richard Rider type. Actually, the one I would compare him to the most is Wendell Vaughn. That is a team-up crossover I would want to see, actually. Very accessible character. His biggest problem is that everything else they did to get him to be Green Lanterns might offend you. This would be a decent first sample of him. Give this issue a try. It's got a 70s artist doing most everything here. He is co-writing, but very much taking the lead, at least in terms of the plotting. Anyway, these robot slaves, they are there to serve the overlords. And here we meet Overlord Prime. And I chuckled for a bit, thinking that he looks like my nemesis. And I got excited because I thought I could tell the story about the time my nemesis ran a contest. Or how for the first 2 years I knew him, he would always introduce himself to me as if we had never met before, when we clearly had. Then I got a bit concerned. I thought it has been 2.5 years since I paid any attention to the comedy circuit or people in comedy. And I do know that at least 2 despicable people have died in that time. I thought there was a good chance, based on the colour of some parts of his body, that my nemesis could have popped his clogs. I decided to check his Twitter feed. And one of the nicest things was when I searched Google with his name followed by the words Twitter and comedy. The first result wasn't even him. It was some bloke who works for a gas company. I was expecting the first tweet I would see would be something like him retweeting about a gig that he is doing at Pelton Fell Social Club or whatever. But I don't know if it is the case that I have been away from this shit for so long that it's so much worse now. But I was greeted with what is quite possibly the worst joke anyone in the world has ever written. Hold on. I want to get it up because wording is important in comedy, and all his jokes are very strenuously padded out with wasted words and labyrinthian setups for the most pull your hair out in frustration puns ever. It's that time of year again when we find out which country, from the UK to the Ukraine, has the best example of a male heir of a gigantic gorilla. Eurovision Kong Sun Test. Hashtag Eurovision 2023. Okay, right, this is fucking awful. Absolutely fucking diabolical. The thing is, he is an arrogant piece of shit, and he does believe these are legitimate, original jokes, and they are the best puns in the entire country. If he told you this and you cringed and said it was shit to him, he would get defensive and start telling you about how 30 people in a pub in Great Sankey laughed at it. Independent of anything else, it also doesn't work as a bit of wordplay. He takes Eurovision Song Contests and he replaces the con in contests with sun. They are not pronounced the same. It doesn't work. He could have, and this is often the truth of his jokes, he could have edited it down and ditched one part of the pun and add a better, more concise thing. Eurovision Kong Contest. It's not any funnier. It's not funny. But it is a marked improvement over Eurovision Kong Sun Test. Another thing is, this guy is pushing 60. He often makes reference to things that are no longer in the public's minds at all. He often uses vernacular from his teenage years that people don't even recognise anymore. There's a lot of shit where the punchline is about things being gay, or men dressed as women, or Asians being bad drivers, and saying the letter L as the letter R. I'm fine with all that. That is the only part of his act that makes him endearing. That is when you go, oh, he's just an old, out-of-touch man. That is the only charm he ever displays when he gets up on stage with a fucking clipboard and reads these off. Anyway, in wordplay, you have to keep up with language, in my opinion. You have to keep on top of things. But here, he calls it the Ukraine. With all the news about Ukraine the last few years, one of the takeaway points, one of the big things established early on, was that it is simply Ukraine, not the Ukraine. I don't know why that is something I'm getting hung up on when the whole thing is a pile of shit. Actually, that entire clause is pointless. Get rid of it. The punchline doesn't make any reference to either of those specific countries. He says from the UK to the Ukraine, and this is because he needs to say European countries, so they justify that the contest is Eurovision. He could have easily just done that by saying European country, but he says from the UK to the Ukraine. As I've already pointed out, the Ukraine, it's not called that, it's just Ukraine. But also, the UK isn't part of Europe anymore. Yeah, it takes part in Eurovision, but why of every country did he pick the UK? He could have said Germany, France, Italy, Portugal. He picked the one country that confuses the Euro part of his punchline, and the other one he only picked because it seems topical and irreverent, and he still called them by the wrong fucking name. Also, Kong, as in King Kong, not a gorilla. It is a monster that resembles a gorilla. Gigantic is largely a wasted word. Male A is a fucking torturous way to avoid saying the word son. As the best example is some of the least efficient wording ever. I would also say, despite everything that he has done, at no point does he justify tests as part of this punchline. There is no test element in the feed line. There's nothing about testing in the setup. The closest is we find out and then the best example. That's not enough to make tests part of the punchline. Oh, by the way, it got nearly 1,000 views. And of all those views, only 1 like and 1 retweet. They were both him. He still does that. That's something he has always done. Again, I hoped in the 2 years he would have recognised that it comes off as desperate and very lame. Eurovision Kong Sun Test. Eurovision Kong Sun Test. That is why I cannot possibly review any more of this issue. After that, there is nowhere to go. Eurovision Kong Sun Test. He thought of that. He thought of that and thought it was good enough to post. He thought of that and... God, it fucking annoys me so much that anyone in their right mind would ever tolerate this cunt. Please don't track him down. I know it is tempting, but I don't want anyone to engage with him. He is a twat. Unpleasant twat. I took a cursory glance at most the rest of his Twitter feeds, and it is him boasting every day about getting Wordles right. But remember, don't mention Scandinavian barcodes.